Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a show dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoop Decker, and I am an artist, and your host. Pique My Interest is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. The next Bay Area creator is the street pop artist in San Francisco, fnnch. At one point, you couldn't walk a block in the Bay without seeing one of his pieces. fnnch is a globally known artist whose specialty is using stencils he creates with a laser cutter in his studio to make multi-level images with spray paint onto walls, wood, and anything he sees fit for his art. He defines street art as uncommissioned work. Murals are great, but usually have parameters, prompts, and restrictions. What he does is more of what he wants to do, and sometimes not necessarily legal. fnnch's creativity with stencils range in size, creatures, locations, but his biggest signature is the honey bear, being repeated and spreading happiness and joy across the Bay and the world. Through dark times, the fnnch golden bear shines bright. In this episode, we dive into what is oversaturation of art, how fnnch handles extreme criticism, and how to turn street art into a career. Is it graffiti? Is he prolific? I say, he's an artist. This episode was recorded on April 8th in San Francisco. I hope you look up his work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled, One Bear at a Time. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I am currently in San Francisco, sitting in this incredible studio with this amazing artist. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. How's your morning been?
It's been good.
Yeah?
Getting a little bit of studio work done.
Well, thank you for having me over here to your studio. You let me see some of your process this afternoon, and it has been wonderful to watch your work, and I can't wait to get into your process a little bit. But time to pique our interest. Tell us a little bit about you. What is your name and where are you from?
My name is fnnch, and I am originally from St. Louis, Missouri, though I currently live in San Francisco, California.
Excellent. And what brought you to San Francisco?
I came out here to go to school. I went to Stanford, and I was there for 4 years, lived off campus for 2 more, and then moved north up to San Francisco at that point.
Right up from Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And what is your craft? And we just had a little bit of a conversation, and it might not be a craft and more of an art form. What is your art form?
Maybe all art has some craft in it. I use stencils and spray paint to make images, usually multi-layered, somewhere between 3 and 12, depending on how many I need.
Yeah. And what is your specialty within your craft?
There's a lot of people doing stencil work, and most of the stencil work you see is going to be kind of black or black and white. And most of what you see is going to be what would be technically called a cartoon, where you have black lines around different shapes. Mine are none of those things, so it is multicolored, and the colors abut each other directly, and there's no black line there.
Yeah. And though, for those who don't know fnnch is a huge artist here in the Bay Area, and I'd say your specialty is being able to take that stencil and being able to repeat it and put that across the city, across the world, and in my opinion, you are spreading happiness. I think your signature,
One bear at a time.
Honey bear that you were talking about, is spreading so much joy and happiness through times that haven't had that much. Through dark times, you've had this golden bear that shined through. And we're going to get into it a little bit, but also, what else do you make besides these bears?
Yeah, I as you mentioned, I call what I do contemporary pop art, and I used to say, actually, I do pop art and nature art, and then I discovered that Warhol did a lot of nature art, and I'm like, well, I just do pop art. So apparently they're the same thing. So I do bugs, birds, sea creatures, flowers, other things you might see in the natural world, and then I do sort of everyday objects, like maybe the balloon dog or the honey bear, or I did a whole series of cult food items like Diet Coke, and I had a show called 9 Cans of LaCroix, where I painted 9 different cans of LaCroix, as the name might suggest. Yeah, so that's sort of the more traditional up-the-middle pop art of pointing your finger at an everyday object.
Yeah.
Like in my latest show, I have a pipe, a stapler, things like, maybe those are the only 2 sort of everyday objects, but that is still a thing that interests me. And then the art that's more nature-oriented.
Yeah, and going back a little bit, what's your background? Do you have any education in artistry or your upbringing in St. Louis? What really turned you into a creator?
Yeah, the specific thing I'm doing now, I started, or maybe the more direct path, what I'm doing, started when I worked on a video game as an illustrator through high school. So maybe from the age of about 14 to 18, I worked on this online game. And I worked basically doing digital illustration. And then fast forward, in college I did some t-shirts and posters and things, not super seriously. And then afterwards I worked in software for a bit, but in things that had a lot of graphics in them, toys or games, you might say, generally toys. And so kept the kind of skills alive. And then, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, at some point I discovered the laser cutter, which is a machine that takes a digital design and cuts it into a material. And I eventually realized that could cut stencils, and that was sort of the bridge into getting into what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I didn't quite realize that the stencils that you create are laser cut, and it's the way that you're able to mass produce these things. And we are in your studio right now, as I said, in San Francisco. It is a metal studio, so sorry about all the extra noises, but it has been a great way to kind of tap into your creativity and kind of see how each one of these bears and your other pieces are made, these different layers and these different textures, and just being able to throw a different layer or a different filter on top of them is able to shed light on a certain topic that's happening in the world. And I think that's such a unique artistic approach to your craft. But what really piqued your interest about stencil art rather than illustration? What makes you want to be able to mass produce a certain image rather than try and create something new and different?
Yeah, so my interest came through street art. And I started following Banksy in college, and then kind of got into some other street artists online, maybe as him as sort of the gateway drug. And then when I moved to San Francisco, it was kind of a quiet time in the scene. These sort of first generation of street artists had moved into galleries or moved out of town, gone to Los Angeles or New York, and there was sort of a lull. And I just was seeing stuff online I thought was really cool. And I was bemoaning not seeing it where I lived. And then you're just like, well, I guess I'll be the change I want to see in the world. And so stencils end up being, if you wanted to try to freehand paint something on the streets, that takes a lot of time. And so the idea of the stencil is that you invest that time. I think about it sort of as like high fixed cost, low marginal cost. You invest a lot of time preparing to paint a thing. And I'll spend more time designing a stencil than I'll spend actually painting one of the paintings.
Yeah.
But, if I could then go put that on the street and make something that's maybe quite complicated, that could never really be possible without the stencil as a tool.
Right.
And so that's what interested me in it. And, street art has a lot of constraints. I used to say, if you can't do it in 90 seconds, you can't do it at all. And so trying to be able to make something that really stands out as maybe a new level of artistry,
right,
is what kind of got me going down this particular path.
Sure. Now, the reason why things have to be going up really quickly is that sometimes street art isn't necessarily legal. That brings up my next point. Your name is Finch, but it's also not Finch. You created Finch, and you also maintain this hidden identity. Where did the name Finch come from, and why do you like to keep your persona a secret?
Yeah, so I'll start with a brief aside, which is that I actually personally define street art as being uncommissioned. And I distinguish it from murals insofar as, to me, those are commissioned public art. So to me, by definition, and this is not necessarily a universal definition, but my definition is that it is a requirement that it is uncommissioned in order to be street art. And so yeah, when you're doing things that aren't legal, signing your legal name to them seems like a bad idea. That's why I did it in the first place. If I came with the name, you'd be hard pressed to find. There are some. Shepard Fairey is his real name. Folks oftentimes ask me, what's your real name? And I kind of have, like, would a rose by their name not be as sweet, whatever. Smell is sweet. You probably know the line better than I do. From Romeo and Juliet, what's in a name?
Don't make me upset right now.
I don't want to put you on the spot. But yeah, I take umbrage with the idea that something is a real or not real name. We have many real names. I used to have a gamer name when I did more gaming as a kid. I have a street art name. I have a legal name. One is not necessarily more or less real than the other. But yeah, I just decided to kind of keep my face off the internet, and it started as just a way not to get arrested. And then at some point, like it's a very one-way street. Like as soon as you're out there, you can't go back. And so at many junctions, I've thought if it was still serving me to stay pseudonymous. And at this point, I've been kind of best effort and kind of keep it going. There have been different reasons at different times. Even still, like I was in Japan and I did some street art, and if they identify who you are, they ban you from the country for life.
Oh,
so
wow.
being easy to find
Yeah.
seems like a mistake.
Well, thank you for pushing your creativity. I think your work is fascinating and gorgeous. I think it stands apart from other street artists, and I think it's very easy to connect to your work. That also brings up, you've had, what'd you say, 8,000 murals across?
No, this is the bears I had in Windows. So
Windows.
Yeah, so during COVID, I did a project where I basically was selling at cost a little kit for what I call the honey bear hunt.
Okay.
And you could buy a bear, and they all had masks. This is before masks became a political thing, whatever. This is, if you can remember back in time when we were all trying to work together to get through this pandemic. But the joke was that they were all different honey bears. So they might have a baker's hat and a mask, or the
Sure.
Ziggy Stardust lightning bolt and a mask, or a pirate hat, or whatever, a frying pan and a mask. And people could put these in their windows. That basically went viral, and I had 10,000 homes in San Francisco have them, and 10,000 homes outside of San Francisco have them, including 20 countries in all 50 states. And so I was already a full-time artist before that happened. I was already working out of the studio. I already had art assistants. I already was, doing reasonably big shows. But this sort of moved me from someone one might know of in San Francisco, if you were into street art, into something that people just kind of knew of.
Yeah.
Because, and the idea of it was you weren't supposed to leave again, if I could rewind you back to early pandemic days, you actually weren't supposed to leave your neighborhood. It was like the level of quarantining that was going on. And so I was like, well, and the MoMA was closed, the galleries, like all the museums were closed, all the galleries were closed, everything was closed. So I was like, well, why don't I just bring the art to you, and then you can basically, I'll publish a map, and you can walk around your neighborhood, and you can spot the bears in the windows, and it can be an activity for you or you and your kids or you and whatever that's outdoors and safe and socially distanced or whatever. And that proved quite popular. You didn't end up needing a map because there were so many of them, you could just walk around and see them.
Right. And I think I asked you earlier why the honey bears over any other thing, and your simple answer was it just makes you happy. And I think that it's universally makes everyone happy. And so again, thank you for supplying something to a community and a culture that was needing something to unify everybody, that can put a smile on everybody's face. And I think your work is just a reflection of that. And to me, that's a success. You've got these bears across the bay, you've got some work across the world, you're selling pieces for a pretty penny. Do you consider yourself successful? What is success in street art, and really what got you succeeding?
Yeah, I didn't get into this trying to become a professional artist. I was just sort of following what interested me. And even a couple of months before I took it full time, I remember that I was working out of another gentleman's studio. It's actually a furniture finisher. And I would kind of use his paint booth after hours. And he just made some comment about, you're going to do this full time. And I was like, I really don't see how I get between where I am now and there. And I was probably like 3 months away from that happening. And doing it full time, I don't even know if that's like a requirement for success. I think that a lot of people make the mistake of trying to turn their avocation into their vocation. So they have a hobby, and the classic example might be you love to surf. And so you quit your job as a banker to go surf full time. But to make a living surfing full time, you need to teach surfing, and you're teaching all those people who aren't really good at surfing, and pretty soon it's sucked all the joy out of something that you used to love. And I actually caution people a lot about, I feel like many people make that mistake where they try to kind of scale up their art. And to some degree, I'm able to do this with more of my time than I would if it was just a hobby. And that is a privilege, but it also comes with a lot of other responsibilities and logistics and concerns, right, that you don't have if you're just doing it as a hobby. So I think success is probably defined by, your own feeling about what you're doing. And yeah, I feel good. Like back when I was starting doing it, people would ask me well, what's the point of this whole street art thing? And I would say kind of two things, which I still believe. One of them is that it felt like I was holding a string and it went off into the fog. and I didn't know, and I was pulling on the string, right, or following the string, and like I didn't know where it went, but at least I was enjoying doing it, and so it didn't seem like a requirement to know, oh, you're going to be able to make a living doing this, oh, you're going to be able to, whatever, get this brass ring or meet this certain milestone, right? It was more that the process was interesting to me, and at that point in my life, that's really all I care about. The other thing I would tell people was that, would me at 60 look back and regret me at whatever 27 spending 2 years as a street artist? I mean, like, oh, I really shouldn't have spent those 2 years as a street artist. I just couldn't imagine feeling that way. I felt like even if this doesn't work in some larger sense, and this is only a period of my life where I'm devoting, like I was devoting almost all my time to it, even though I wasn't making a living doing it, and therefore not devoting all of my time to other economically productive activities that might, seem more logical or be a clearer and better payoff. But, at the end of the day, you die, and you don't take any of the money with you, or you don't take any of the brass rings with you. And so I was like, well, I'm pretty sure old me is going to think that current me is doing something cool. And so, I'm not sure what else really matters.
Just trying to make our future selves proud.
Yeah.
I love that. And then I think it's time to get into a little bit. Let's talk about your creation process.
Okay.
How do you get into it, and what do you do? Where do you get the ideas? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think every artist is this way. You're just thinking of things. I'll just see a thing, and I'll just, I might take even a screenshot from a movie or something, or just snap a photo or sketch something in my sketchbook, right? I have a certain, sensibility. Yeah. So that's one source of ideas. A lot of things actually come based on projects as well. Like, I'll give you a concrete example. I don't want to make it that concrete because this project might not happen, but I'm discussing a mural right now that would be very large on a building in San Francisco. I don't own the building, so I don't get to control necessarily fully what goes on it. And so the way I think about this is that there's a set of images that I would paint, things that kind of meet my artistic sensibility, and there's a set of images that meet maybe their requirements, that line up with their interests or what their business is. Imagine it's a coffee shop. Maybe you want to paint something that relates to coffee. Maybe you don't. You don't necessarily have to. But that at least relates to what they're doing. And I'm basically trying to find something at the intersection of those two sets. And so there are many things that I would paint, but oftentimes the direction within the set of things that I find interesting is being influenced by external sources, like a commission or a mural.
Right.
And then the other side of that are things that are solely being driven by an internal source, which is, I have an idea for a show or for a project. And many times I'm able just to manifest that with no input from anybody outside of myself. And so, I'm trying to balance between those two things. And each of them has their own benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah. I think I read in an article once that one of your artistic philosophies is being able to find what you know and love, repeat, and be able to produce that and be able to do that over and over again. When did you get the idea to start overlaying different aspects on top of your honey bears?
Yeah, so the first honey bear was painted in a park in Noe Valley, which is kind of a family-friendly neighborhood up the hill from here. And it actually was notable for two reasons. One was that it was painted over the fastest of anything I'd done. It was under 7 days before the city had painted over it, or buffed it, as is the term of art here. And but people clearly liked it. Like, there were a lot of kids in that neighborhood. They were screaming at it. I saw one girl demand that her mom take a photo of her in front of it. And so I kind of felt like I was onto something. Then I was painting a lot of them in the Mission neighborhood where we are now. I went out one night, I painted 5 of them onto mailboxes, and people seemed to like those. But that very first night, doing that very first set, it felt too repetitive. It was like, this feels like graffiti now, where I'm just repeating the same thing over and over and over again with no consideration for the broad audience of people who are seeing it. And so that's what just, can I do something that has the repetition of graffiti, but that it feels like you're in on the joke, that it's for the whole populace, not just for the graffiti community to appreciate. And so I did one in a baker hat. I put one of those outside of the Tartine Bakery here. I did one in a pirate hat, and I went out the next time and did both of those. I then realized that carrying, if it's 4 cans of spray paint for the base bear, another 3 for the baker hat, another 4 for the pirate hat, with the number of stencils all covered in paint, was just not viable. And so then every week I would do one new design, and I would go walk a certain territory and find empty mailboxes. These are the USPS relay boxes. They're green, and they're not for the public. They're how the Postal Service passes letters amongst themselves. I'm not sure everybody, I think maybe the mission has this because postage is delivered on foot because there's nowhere to park really, and it's reasonably dense. And so I don't actually know exactly what they're for, but they're not the blue boxes that you're used to.
Right.
They're just completely blank. There's nothing printed on them. They're just entirely blank, and they're green. And they get painted over by the Postal Service every couple weeks. And so I'd be walking my dog, and I'd go and I'd find ones that were empty and kind of note that, and then add bears to those. And I would skip boxes so that I would try to get it where there was always, it wasn't like you were seeing the same bear repeatedly. If you
Right.
lived on this block, and you walked around 1 or 2 blocks, every bear you saw would be different, assuming that they all lived for a bit. And so I did a different bear every week for most of 2015, and that was the original impetus. It kind of took on a life of its own at some point, but they weren't intended to be tied to anything. It was just, what hat can I put on it?
Right. And then slowly but surely it started to grow a little bit, and the masks started to come in. And I just want to say thank you for pursuing that artistic ideology, because I think it's definitely working, and I think it's making people happy. And
Yeah. People, I have this concept called the adjacent familiar, which is that people want to be pushed, but only so much, right? So they like pop music because it's always progressing, but it's not a radical departure from pop music before. And so pop art has sort of 2 meanings. One of them refers to maybe an artistic movement started in the 60s, but the word actually just means popular, right? And so it's art that the general public can appreciate, and that was the idea in the 60s, and that's still the idea now.
Awesome. Well, while you're doing your work, what inspires you? What gets your creative juices flowing?
The most inspirational, like the thing that makes me want to step up my game the most is seeing somebody else's artwork that's really good, right? So I feel like that, to me, I almost get angry where you're like, damn, I wish I had something that good or did something that good. That's probably the best thing to make me really want to like get after it and do great work.
As a street artist, you're often reflecting the hard times that are happening in the world. Do you often wait for the next global catastrophe or the next big wave of political statements to be able to implement into your work?
Yeah, this was mostly done by accident and sort of became a large part of my work and has been shrinking as an overall part of my work. It was the first, I now call them cause bears. That's not an external name, this is how I think about them. The very first one was actually the pink pussy hat bear when Donald Trump cut funding to Planned Parenthood during his first presidency. One of my friends was like, you should do something about this. And I'm like, what do you think I can do? I'm like, well, you have a platform, people listen to you, like, so then I did the first bear where I gave, part of the sale to Planned Parenthood in this case. And that might have been 2017, probably as a timeline. And that idea I did kind of on and off. So in a 2019 show, we just had the crazy wildfires in Northern California. And I certainly, the city here there was like a day the sun didn't rise because it was so smoky.
Yeah.
And I certainly knew people who, their whole town burned up. And so I did a firefighter bear and gave, money to a nonprofit that basically helped firefighters who were injured in the line of duty with medical bills and other support. And yeah, again, there are any number of examples like that. That happened with when I did the mask bear during COVID, I did it both as a street art project and then it moved into the windows, but I also did it as a fine art work. And it didn't seem, at the time you could have made the argument, well, you should just take money and put it in your pocket because a lot of uncertainty. And like, I didn't know when COVID started what would happen to my business of art. Part of me thought that, well, I'm in the luxury goods market, my sales are about to go to zero. And I basically just held all the money I could to be able just to weather the storm. That's actually not what happened. People ended up buying a lot of art during the pandemic. But irrespective of that, not even really knowing, I was like, it would feel pretty weird to do this mask bear and not donate money. And so I did both a mask bear and then a soap bear, or really like a hand sanitizer soap dispenser with like a pump on its head.
Yeah.
And so the money from the mask bear went to what's called the Safety Net Fund, which did direct cash transfers to artists in the Bay Area who are out of work. Pretty low requirements. You just say, hey, I'm a performing artist. If you're in the theater, you can't continue doing your art. And so they just kind of match people up, and then you just send you cash. And then the soap dispenser went to SF New Deal, which basically paid restaurants to make food to give to people in need. And so you kind of get both the restaurant support. And that felt good. And so, yeah, and then it became kind of like a thing people were coming to me for. Different nonprofits, different issues. And it's nice to be able to give in that way. It eventually came with a cost, which is when I was dealing with natural disasters like wildfires and pandemics. There's not a lot of emotion tied up around that. It's more we're all in this together. When it came to more social justice type issues, or even like the war in Ukraine was one where like people were like, oh, well, if you attempt to cover your costs in doing the sale, like, are you now a war profiteer, right? And like, am I profiting from, different I'm basically taking advantage of these social situations, and that's not really how I saw it. I'm like, well, this money wouldn't go to this cause anyway, but at some point, it didn't seem worth it anymore. There's like appearance and impact, right? And you can't basically maximize both, right? And so for a while, I was just willing to maximize impact and give as much money as I could, which basically meant having to cover my costs because I can't afford to run the studio. Like there was times when we'd run it for 3 months doing nothing but making pieces that I'd sold to donate, right? And it's like, if there's 4 employees here, whatever, payroll, you understand how it works.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at some point I just kind of got tired of people being upset at me and realized that maybe things like natural disasters were a better way to do this. And I can just donate, because the other option is I can just sell artwork, make money, and then just donate money to whatever causes I want as a private citizen, and nobody knows what I do. And so I do that. I was doing that anyway, and it was a smaller number. Now maybe it's a bit of a bigger number, but so there's many ways that you can help out. But that was kind of the life of the cause bears.
Right.
I did one last year around voting, just trying to turn out the vote, and then I did one earlier in the year for a nonprofit called Dance Safe, which provides fentanyl testing kits for places like Burning Man, where I've been going for 10 years, where you just you think you're doing MDMA, or you think you're doing cocaine, or whatever you think you're doing, but maybe you're about to die because there's fentanyl in there. And so this is actually a big issue, and so the testing kits are a great service and something that I believe in. I actually lost my cousin to a fentanyl overdose. And so, yeah, so it's not not part of my practice anymore, but those are things that seemed, maybe people get mad at me about voting turnout, but that seemed to be sort of like a place where I can do this and be effective and also not get harassed.
Right. As artists, we are always trying to find ways to implement ourselves into society with our medium. And I think, like you were talking about the pink pussy hats, you might not be able to knit or crochet them, but you can definitely put it into your art and shed light among that way. And I'm just curious, while you're working and putting up your murals or your pieces and using these stencils, how often do you have to adapt or change, the stencil gets shifted just a little bit, and now, oh crap, now this whole thing's just slightly off. Now, how do you adapt?
Yeah, every time is the answer.
Well, like you said, you're doing these in less than 90 seconds.
Yeah, so that's on the street art, but even on the murals or the fine art, the problem is that it's basically thermal issues. Well, sorry, there's 2 things that happen. One is that when you cut the stencil, the material's at one temperature, and the surface is at one temperature. So let's say I'm painting on the wood, like you saw me doing earlier. As the temperature goes up, the cardboard might expand more than the wood, and now they don't match. That's one thing that can go wrong. And obviously, the moment in the sand for the wood is whenever it was cut, right? So it might have been cut a month ago or a year ago. Whatever the temperature was, is kind of maybe where we're starting here, and then it's going to adjust from there. The stencil has the same thing. The other thing is that as soon as you put spray paint on that stencil, if you want to use it a second time, the liquid is going to be interacting with it. And so a lot of this is about trying to make the most perfect artwork from an inherently deeply imperfect medium. Like spray paint is also a mess. It goes everywhere. You saw me, I have gloves, I have a respirator, I've got, if you're going to be painting indoors, which I try to do as little as possible, you're putting down a drop cloth, you're using plastic sheeting to cover everything because the little fine dust can get everywhere, right? And so, I make liberal use of tape. I make use of an Olfa knife, which is like an X-Acto knife that, I can go and I can actually scrape back tiny bits of paint, try and line things up. You also learn how to maybe shift stencils or notice, well, it's off, but if I can do it consistently off every single time, then maybe at the end, there are fewer repairs. So this is a thing, I guess, that the audience doesn't ever see, but the number of Olfa knife blades I go through is significant.
Well, as you're scraping back some of this paint, or you're trying to figure out the next thing to paint, as artists, we all run into a brick wall. How do you overcome a creative block?
Yeah, I don't have creative blocks. I wake up in the morning, like the way I view my art is, I think what people think it's like being an artist is that you sit around all day and you smoke some weed and you put a couple of brushes down and inspiration comes and hits you. You wait for inspiration to strike and then you get the lightning bolt and then you make your masterpiece. And I remember, I guess I heard this in a documentary from Jerry Seinfeld. He was describing his early days as a comedian, that he would sort of struggle to write jokes and he would wait for inspiration. And then he was sitting having lunch and he watched some construction workers go back to work after lunch. And he's like, they don't want to go back to work. Like, I write jokes for a living. Like, if they can go back to work, certainly I can go back to work, right? And so he started a calendar where every day he wrote jokes, he would put an X on the calendar. And he's like, I'm gonna keep the streak going, whatever, for 40 years. Right. And he's, the GOAT. Like, he's one of the top comedians of all time. And so like, I get up in the morning, whatever, 6 a.m., not have a baby. I used to get started sooner, but whatever. By 8 a.m., I'm at my desk. If I'm going to do some emails, I'm going to do some design work, do some drawing, whatever it is. Time gets blocked out. I do things. It's just like a job. And so there's just, when you're sitting there needing to, like, you're going to figure out something to do, right? And that something is going to push you forward. Yeah. The other thing is, like, the idea of a creative block is sort of that you don't know what to do creatively, right? And I keep basically like a Kanban board of projects that are pending, in progress, and done. There are way more projects that I would like to do than I possibly have time to do, right? And so I basically have two techniques. One is that I try to limit the number of projects that I work on at any one time, because the most exciting bit of a project is right when you start it, when you're kind of going through all the ideas are opening up and you're seeing all the possibilities. And then there's the remaining 90% of the work where you just like grind through getting it done. Like, I just had a show open, right? And I mean, things like sizing the text that's going to go on the, title wall, or, whatever, like making the QR code that someone's going to scan to get to the website. Like, 90% of the work is stuff like that, right?
Right. The grind. I like what you said.
Yeah. And so if I use the next project as a carrot, that, if I can actually ship this project and be done with it, then I give myself permission to start the next one. Now I'm really incentivized to do it. Right. So I had two parts of this. That's the one part. What's the other part? Maybe there is no other part. Maybe it's just keep the projects. I thought I had another point.
But it is also to have another project ahead of you is a way to continue to push towards that.
Yeah, I think if you let yourself follow only the most interesting thing at the particular moment and not focus on shipping, then you would basically be like a mile wide and an inch deep with a lot of open loops of projects where you have a really good idea that you're really excited about, but are just nowhere near to actually having people see it. And that seems like a recipe for despair, frankly. And I think having discipline to finish projects, and then I then turn around and be like, okay, what is the most exciting thing I think I could be working on? And there's always something that's exciting.
Well, while Finch doesn't have that much of a creative block, do you have any hobbies, and do they complement or contradict your street art?
Yeah, I do. I play the drums.
Okay.
And I play in a Americana folk band, but it definitely is a compliment, I would say, because in my art practice, it's the Finch show, right? As an artist, you're singing, you're dancing, like, here's me, here's my art. With the music, I play with I am not the artist in the band. There is another individual who writes all the songs, plays guitar and sings, and plays harmonica. And as a drummer, your job is simply one of support, right?
The beat.
Yeah, keep the beat, and especially in Americana. Maybe you could say, in a thing like jazz drumming or something like Neil Peart, from Rush, might be more of a centerpiece. But generally speaking, the job of the drummer is just to get out of the way and help everybody else do their thing. And so it's a refreshing contrast to, I am the main attraction in my art practice, but I am a secondary supporting role in my hobby. And so that's nice. I just don't have to give many fucks. I don't write any songs. There's no pressure on me to write any songs. I'll write my drum part, but it's not that hard.
There's probably no honey bears in the drum part.
No honey bears, yeah. It's is it in 3 or is it in 4? There's only so many time signatures. There's only so many styles, right? Is it a rock beat or is it a country beat?
Sure, and the polar difference between the painting and the music is probably a good refresher, just to get out of this mentality a little bit and just go do something musical for a bit. And who knows, maybe that might inspire something in your painting. I firmly believe that. But going a little bit further, would you recommend going to school or taking classes to build on your craft?
So I don't know. I did not go to art school, and I do not have an art degree.
Would you go to Stanford for?
I did 2 degrees, one in mathematics and one in economics.
Okay.
So very different path. And I ended up here through a series of random events. Yeah, what I tell people is that art is a career best done by accident. And that's because it's basically so hard to do that if you try to do it on purpose, you're most likely going to fail. But if you were working towards it but didn't know you're working towards it, then if you failed, you didn't know that you failed because you didn't know you were even trying, right? But if you succeed, it now comes as a surprise because you didn't try to do it in the first place. And that sounds a little bit like wax on, wax off or something. But there are so ultimately few people that make a living. I was just telling somebody about this earlier. The stat I've heard is that in New York and London, only 1% of visual artists sell $100,000 a year or more of their art.
Wow.
And you could live in San Francisco for under $100,000 a year, but you wouldn't want to. 90,000 is considered to be low income here, I believe. It's 120 for a family and 90 for an individual. The big cities tend to be where artistic opportunities are. Anyway, it's a tough road. So does school help you make a living at it? I don't know. It does presumably help you with your craft, right? If you want to just get, I had the privilege of taking a very short drawing class from a great drawing teacher. Recently, it's not like this is how I got started. I did it last summer. And I was like, wow, this is a pedagogy I hadn't experienced before. And I could see how if you invested in this path, you're going to become a much better draftsperson, pencil, pen, etc. There is a way to teach this. And, they're probably not teaching digital illustration in art school. Maybe they are, but they probably weren't when I started 20 some odd years ago, whatever it was, a lot of years. And so the craft that I actually do, you may or may not even learn.
No. So what would be your advice for somebody trying to get started in street art?
Well, street art is a great place to start because you don't need anybody's permission. So the problem with the traditional art world system is that if you want to have a gallery show, you need a gallery, right? And the galleries have 10 times more people coming to them asking to be in shows than they actually represent. That's a stat I'd heard. Not sure it's been well referenced, but that sounds, from my own, it actually might be 100 to 1 of people that would like to be in a gallery. So you're just facing gatekeepers left and right. If you want to go paint murals, you're actually facing even crazier gatekeepers because now you need somebody who owns a piece of property to give you permission to do it. And in San Francisco, that's all you need. In St. Louis, you actually then need the city council to vote to approve every art individually in order to have permission. So even if you're willing to do it, and even if the person who owns the building is willing to let you do it, you still need a third set of permission. And those council people are not going to be the most open-minded about things.
Yeah, and definitely probably go against a lot of your artistry.
Street art is a duocracy, right? People before have come to me sort of asking, for permission almost to do it. And I'm like, if you need the Pope to bless you, then sure, you've been, just go. You go out, it's illegal, but the benefit that you get is that you don't need to ask anybody. And so when I started, I did 2 years of nothing that was legal because nobody was willing to give me even a construction site to paint on, right? Nonetheless, a wall, nonetheless, a gallery show, right? And so I didn't have to, I was able to make my art. And then when it turned out that people liked what I was doing, then the other pieces started to fall in place.
Yeah.
And so I like that sort of a thing. I also think there are parallels in maybe social media. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but a person could be, say, a TikTok first artist, and there you're going right to an audience with your art. I don't do actually any TikTok at all, but I've seen artists. There's one guy who like puts multicolored paint in a bucket and pokes holes in it and spins it, and it makes it very beautiful. It takes like 8 seconds to do a painting, and it looks really cool. He's gotten very good at doing this, but that makes like the perfect 8-second clip, and he's got millions and millions of followers, and he sells lots of art. And so this is just another way of working around the establishment. Because if you want to go up the middle, like you better go to Yale for art school, right? And you better get placed into a good gallery right away. And there is a path to be walked, but it's going to be walked by, single-digit numbers of people per generation.
Yeah.
Or maybe low tens,
Right.
or mid tens. I don't know. I mean, not a lot.
I've often argued that social media has turned art into more of entertainment, which everybody can take their own way. But
Yeah.
I've just found that that's my take. But speaking of love-hate and everybody having their own take, if you don't mind bringing up a little bit, you've had quite a bit of criticism here in the Bay Area. Some words that I've seen is kind of oversaturation. You've had, as you've said, 10,000 bears across windows in all the Bay, and people have said that you've overrepresented a little bit. Some of your bears represent LGBTQ+. You've had Black Lives Matter. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so one of the ways I like to think about this, well, first, I guess it's really easy to address the overrepresentation. I merely facilitated people putting those bears in their windows. By becoming extremely popular, people put a lot of bears in windows. Like, it wasn't like I put them there. I just made it convenient for people to do it. So it did feel a little bit much when it was happening. Right? Like, I could see where if you didn't like it, turning every corner and seeing, it was basically call it one per block for every block of the entire city. Say any block you walked down, you saw one. I could see that if you didn't like it, that would frustrate you. If you did like it, that'd be awesome because they're everywhere. And obviously, a lot of people like them because they're the ones putting them in their own windows. And so I do sympathize with that. But I think the same argument could be made for, if you don't like ads for Apple, like good luck walking around San Francisco, right? Like you can't drive down the highway. You can't there are several in my neighborhood, right? And they're always having, and I actually don't mind ads for Apple, but if that rubbed you the wrong way, right? Like you're going to be constantly frustrated.
Right.
And I don't know. I think to me, one of the overarching things here, which I think maybe helps crystallize this, is this is a paraphrase of a quote from Duchamp, which is that the artist is only responsible for 50% of the artwork, and the audience brings the other 50%, right? So I might, I try to create a super ridiculous example here. Actually, no, here's a really beautiful example. The very first mural I ever got to paint was on a legal mural. It was a Pacific Gas and Electric substation in the Mission, and I painted a bunch of sea turtles going down the wall, right? Big sea turtles. And this gentleman who lived in the area, had grown up in the area, came by, basically this seems like a sign from God. I had a turtle for 20 years who died yesterday, and now he's been immortalized into this wall here. So did I know about this turtle? No. Do I believe that is why this mural got painted? No, I don't. But he's bringing 50%, when he brings his 50%, what he sees in this artwork is an immortalization of his personal turtle, right? And you can cast this upon anything. So anything of mine that you see, or anything of any artwork, of any artist that you see, you 50%. I don't believe your 50% is really my responsibility, right? And so if you're bringing, your bad home life, or you're bringing, some trauma or frustration, right? If you see the honey bear and you think that it represents the tech scene in San Francisco, which is what some people think, because some of my buyers, probably disproportionate number to the population as a whole, work in technology or are young professionals, right? And so I have a pretty wide net. I sell artwork for reasonably affordable prices as it is, and so I can tend to reach a lot of people. So I think it's an oversimplification to say I'm only selling tech people. That's completely untrue. But in any case, if you think the tech people are bad, then you might think that the honey bear is bad. That feels like your 50%. Doesn't feel like my 50%. It's just a container of honey. So I think ultimately it's like, you have every right in the world to be upset about any artwork that you see. And there are artworks that I personally have deep loathing for, right? Things I don't think are well made or interesting, or, I try to be generally positive, but there's some things I'm like, it's very alienating or whatever. But I try to keep in mind that this is my problem and it's not necessarily like your problem, and I don't need to punish you because, I don't like your music, or I don't like your play, or I don't like your whatever.
I don't think that your work is prolific at all. I think it makes people happy. I think that's it. And some people...
It's not deep. There's no deep conspiracy.
Right, yeah. Some people just might not be having a great day, and why they might interpret it their own way. And like you said, you're just doing your thing. I don't necessarily think you're taking opportunities away from other people.
This is actually a thing, if I can take a moment to talk about this. Yeah. So I think one of the challenges, I tried to find out. So my experience with artists of the generation above me has been very mixed. So some of them are just super cool and very nice and, willing to give me advice or mentorship. And some of them are really hostile, right? And I was confused. Like, why are people in the arts so mean? Because this was not my experience when I was working in software. Everyone was really nice to each other. And what I came to realize is that it's because the market is so small, as I mentioned, because there's so little money to go around. People end up in a zero-sum mindset. And they believe that if I made a sale, that sale must have come at the expense of somebody else. And in some narrow sense, if I were to win a grant, say, then that grant can only go to one person. I've never won a grant, mind you. I stopped trying years ago. I was even once invited to apply. They told me to apply because they were going to give it to me, and then I still didn't get it, right? So in some narrow sense, those are zero sum. But the rest of it, I actually think what I'm doing is literally the exact opposite of what is being accused here. So let's say there's a young professional in tech, law, or medicine, which are, medicine is a very large industry in San Francisco because of UCSF, right? They buy one of my paintings. Very often, it's the first fine artwork that they've ever purchased, right? This is not someone being like, okay, I'm going to buy one painting ever, and I can pick between, somebody born and raised in San Francisco or Finch. It's just, I've never bought a painting before, and this is appealing to me for some reason I might not even articulate. And it would be a pretty crappy art collection to only have one artist in it, right? So I view myself actually as the gateway drug, where you come in and you like Finch because it's accessible imagery delivered to you on your own turf. You get something, and then you're like, well, who else is doing street art in San Francisco? And maybe what else in art is happening in San Francisco? And then you end up as the collector, right? Something needs to kind of, like the number of people that actually buy fine art for their own home, I don't know the number, but it's some minuscule percentage of people, right? The number of people who live in or visit San Francisco that go to our modern art museum is 5% of the people, right? So 95% are not ending up in our probably most prestigious art institution, right? And so that's why I can reach them with the street art. Maybe I can reach them with more affordable artworks sold online, less pretentious than a gallery might be, less alienating. And so I actually think I'm growing the pie. And so I find, people very often have these zero-sum mindsets, but that's not how I view the world. I don't think that it's like a fixed pie and we're all fighting over slices of it. I find it to be a very small worldview and a very sad worldview. And I think we have an opportunity to work together to, like, one great example of this in San Francisco is that when I moved here to the Bay in 2005, there's only one 3-Michelin star restaurant in the whole Bay Area. It's a restaurant called the French Laundry. That's up in Napa, still there, very famous. Now we've got 8, which is equal to Manhattan. So we've turned into, we might be the greatest culinary city in all of America now. And what happened between those two times? What happened was hella tech money got interested in eating at nice restaurants. Like, who can afford to spend $500 a person on a meal, which is what it's pretty much going to take to get you into a 3-Michelin star restaurant? Someone who earns a lot of money at Google, right? And so now we have chefs as rock stars. We have a much greater, the whole industry benefits, right? So not only do we have more restaurants that can charge more money and support more chefs working underneath them, and that's the sous chefs and the line cooks, and we have more pop-ups doing more interesting things, and we have more food trucks, right? We have an incredible food truck scene here, right? And so that's basically, the pie here wasn't fixed. The pie just was a certain size that was fine, but not very big. And now the pie is actually quite large, and there's a lot of opportunity to be in the culinary arts, right? The visual arts have not had that growth. We've had some growth, but I think we could be as popular as food is, maybe if we, stop getting angry at each other.
When you're just doing your part.
I'm just doing my thing.
Just doing your thing, being Finch.
One bear at a time.
Doing your art. Fantastic. I think it's time to clear the air a little bit. Any misconceptions about your craft?
Misconceptions about the craft, yes. So people that do freehand, okay, so there's a thing I call toolism, which is basically hating on the tool, right? And so the people that use brushes hate on the people that use aerosol paint because they don't have physical connection to the medium, man. They're just holding out in front. And the people that do freehand spray paint hate on the people that do stenciling because they're not even using, traditional can control and techniques, right? They're just holding up a shape and filling it. And maybe people who are doing stenciling are hating on the wheat pasters because they're just printing it out on a printer and putting it up, right? Maybe the wheat pasters are hating on people doing stickers because they don't even have to mix up their own paste and take any risk. They're just peeling a thing that already has adhesive on it, right? And I'm sure the sticker people are hating on somebody, probably the TikTok artists, right? And so I find this all to be just a big pile of nonsense, right? Like, is stenciling cheating? If your value system is about skill as a freehand aerosol artist, then yes, it's undermining that. But the brush artist might disagree, who's hating on you, right? So, to me, I'm attempting to get a certain aesthetic end, and you cannot, no matter how skilled, get the end that I'm achieving with freehand aerosol. My edges are perfectly sharp, and details can be down to 1/10 of an inch, I would say, and nobody has 1/10 of an inch can control. Like a spray cap doesn't even go that small, right? It's basically physically impossible. So, to me, I got into stenciling more because of an aesthetic that I was interested in of flat planes of colors than I was in it as a way to paint faster or more efficiently. That happened to be something I discovered along the way, but I kind of liked how it looked, and again, it let me do things I thought were interesting. So yeah, I think there's a misconception there that like somehow. The other thing about this, if I can continue my rant,
Please.
is that people think, it's cheating. I would invite the people saying that to design me a 7-layer stencil, and then they can come back to me about what is or is not easy or hard.
How easy it is.
Right? Yeah. You're used to seeing, as mentioned earlier, 1 or 2-layer stencils, black or black and white. And they're made in a very particular method, which you can do kind of entirely by hand on a piece of, whatever, acetate. So you need to push past 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 layers. Like, I think there's some skill there that they underappreciate because they've never tried it. And I think if they actually got into it, something that looked easy on the outside, they might find it actually, to make something look easy takes a lot of work.
Yeah. What I've learned from this podcast is that artists are storytellers, and I think your story is very evident. And just because I think of how crisp and clean it looks easy. It looks like something that I could do at home myself. And like you said, until somebody actually goes out and actually tries it and realizes your skill set and realizes your story that you're trying to tell.
Or how many Olfa knife blades I go through. Or how much tape. I travel to mural sites. I use basically as tools, I think 7 kinds of tape. Right? And everyone has a different purpose, right? Do I want to be such an expert on tape? No, I don't. No, I don't.
Well, I just want to say thank you for pursuing your creativity and learning about all these different tapes and letting us see Finch's work. Going a little further, what's next for the world of Finch?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I'm working on now, and these things may or may not come to pass. I think they both will. But what I'm currently most actively working on is putting together a retrospective of all of my honey bear paintings. So my bread and butter is painting these honey bears onto wood, cutout wood, from editions. I've been doing those editions for 10 years. I've done 115 different editions. Wow. We discussed some of them, like the pink pussy hat bear, or the psychedelic bear, or the firefighter bear, the baker bear, the pirate bear. I can't list them all because there are 115 of them. I'm not even sure I would remember them all. But I am putting together all of them. That involves borrowing some from collectors because I don't have them all. That involves taking some off my own walls that I have at home. That involves buying some of my own work back. I just today purchased one of my own paintings from somebody because I wanted to, add it to my own collection so I could have. For this, I'm going to call it the Finch Museum.
Okay.
And it will be opening in a undisclosed but extremely prominent location in San Francisco. Hopefully, I'd like to do it at the end of May.
Okay.
That might be a little optimistic, but we'll see. Tamara from Clementines is going to be loaning me some of her paintings.
Another pique my interest guest.
Another pique my interest guest. So it's all full circle. That's one thing I'm doing. The other project, because I just finished a project, so been working on the Finch Museum in the last one, but the new one I'm spinning up is that last year for Burning Man, I made what I call a solar sculpture. It is currently sitting in Golden Gate Park, which is one of the biggest city parks in the country, in the middle of the road. It is an arch, 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. On the outside of that arch are solar panels, but it looks black, and on the underside of it are lights, and it generates power during the day. Everything is stored within the structure. You can't see it, and then at night, or at dusk, it starts to play calming, multicolored patterns. I liked doing that. I liked the idea, but I learned a lot. One learning was maybe I should not use a home backup system inside of an outdoor sculpture. So, there's 10 kilowatt hours of storage, which is 200 pounds of batteries, and a 300 watt inverter that's meant to run like an RV or a small home. And it's, complicated. And so I have an idea for where to take this next. One thing that actually might interest your listeners is that I view projects oftentimes as a chain where each thing is sort of a response to the prior one. And so certainly my sculptures for Burning Man were this way. The solar project came about because I did one that was incredible but required a lot of fuel to run and several times a day of maintaining the fuel system. And that was spirit breaking because of the time required. And I was like, okay, I need a no maintenance sculpture. And then I was describing some of the learnings from that sculpture, which I will then go and iterate something that is maybe smaller and more modular, that can perhaps use marine products that are meant to be outdoors, literally submerged in water, batteries, solar controllers, etc., for sailboats and things like that. And so that is a project I'm hoping to place in San Francisco sometime later this year, but I want to kind of get into the kind of the R&D phase of it, of refining the idea and starting to play around with what's technically possible.
Absolutely.
So that's what's next.
Fantastic. And not to get too much into your personal life, to keep it a secret a little bit, but what's next for you personally? I know you got a baby.
Yep, new one on the way. So
congratulations.
This is why we're not going to Burning Man this year. Baby's coming end of August. So that's new. Not much else that's new. That tends to be a thing that takes up some fair amount of time. And
yeah.
I find it's hard to describe, I think, to people who haven't, it basically makes my life more structured in a way where, I used to work every Sunday on my art practice. I no longer work on Sundays on my art practice, right? That's just a family day. There are family things happening, right? Yeah. And I used to work maybe some number of nights on my art practice. I'm not working that many nights on art practice. Typically, I try to get home at 5 o'clock. I have nights off and things like that. Occasionally, those nights, I might putz around with some art. Maybe I do it after he goes to bed. He's a baby. He goes to bed at 7 o'clock. But while he might sleep 11 hours, to get 8 hours, I need to fit my 8 within his 11.
Yeah.
It is not challenging to have my 8 get pushed to where they're not overlapping the 11 very much, and then you don't get them. He's waking up at 6 a.m. no matter what happens. So if I get to bed at midnight, there's only 6 hours left.
Well, I'm just glad you're finding time to continue to create and push that.
All things are possible.
And where can we see your work?
Yes, you can see it at finch.com, FNNCH, at Finch on Instagram and Twitter. You could see it on the streets of San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis, Brooklyn, New York, San Diego, Hong Kong, Lafayette, Indiana. I don't know, random places. There's no map, so you just have to find it.
Yeah.
If you find it, you're more likely to do it in San Francisco. I have art in about half of the neighborhoods in the city.
That's incredible.
And so, yeah.
And as we've said, you'll turn the corner, you'll see one of these honey bears, and you'll just get the biggest smile on your face. I love them, and again, thank you for pursuing your artistic endeavors and sharing your art with the world. I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I do end with one last question.
Okay.
If you could excel at any other craft other than your own, what would you want to do?
One of the things that I would like that would be really beneficial for my own art practice actually is to be good at some 3D technical program,
Okay.
like a Fusion or a Rhino. Yeah, like some 3D modeling program that would help with the sculpture tremendously.
Yeah, I've noticed up here you almost have a 3D sculpture that's almost just two dimensions.
It's just two paintings slotted together. Yeah.
And then I think I've also seen some inflatable.
Yeah. I also have the
bears.
toy over there.
Yeah. So there's some 3D out
There's some
there.
3D. In this case, I'm working basically with with a 3D artist to help me.
Okay.
And we're going back and forth and back and forth and back
Yeah.
and forth and back and forth. And I have some skills in that domain, and they have expanded, but I'm still, compared to my Illustrator skills, they're very rudimentary, and it's very frustrating to be used to being able to go from an idea to some outcome with high proficiency, and then to enter a domain where you're just floundering.
Struggling.
And I feel like it's like that like Wile E. Coyote thing, maybe where like your feet are moving really quickly on the ground and not actually going anywhere. So that's not a totally different, I guess that is a totally different art form, but it's something that would have impact on my art practice, and it would be great to have that craft. I use the word technical skill to kind of mean what you use as craft.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be able to basically be able to do this thing to then achieve some artistic ends. And I feel like there are artistic ends that I cannot achieve because I don't have the skills, the craft skills to be able to actually make the thing.
Well, very excited to see what kind of 3D aspects come from you. Who knows? Maybe we'll start to see some percussion a part of your bears.
Who knows? I don't know. Yeah.
knows?
The world is weird.
The world is very weird. And us artists just make it weirder.
That's why we're here.
I can't thank you enough. And joining me and piquing my interest, thank you to all my peekers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. I'm currently in San Francisco and can't wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourself, be kind to each other. I'm Scoop Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.